So I think a lot of people are pretty familiar with Pascal's Wager. Some people use it as a kind of like proof that God exists. However, it's not really proof or evidence as such. It's more of just an argument for why you should hedge your bets on worshipping a god, right? And honestly, it's a pretty flawed argument, like big time. Today we're going to be talking briefly about what Pascal's Wager is, my thoughts on it, some of the reasons why I think it's a bit silly, and then we're going to be briefly talking about kind of, I guess you could say kind of like my alternate solution to it. Now, I'm like no expert on this, but I am going to be talking about it to the best of my understanding. But that said, if I do make any really obvious or stupid mistakes, please just point them out to me and let me know. Simplifying this quite a bit, but way back in the 1600s, there was this French philosopher and mathematician and physicist, and he put forward an argument. His name was Pascal. He put forward an argument that said every person would be better off if they lived their life as though God existed. And like I say, simplifying a lot, but basically this was called Pascal's Wager, and it said that essentially the existence of God is a binary. Either he exists or he doesn't. And you can either spend your life worshipping him or not worshipping him. With this in mind, Pascal said if you worship him and he exists, then the outcome is that you get eternal joy and happiness and good stuff in heaven, right? And if you worship him and he doesn't exist, there's no reward but also no punishment, because there's no afterlife. Similarly, if you don't worship him and there's no God, there's no reward, no punishment, no afterlife, whatever. But if you don't worship him and there is a God, then you face like eternal punishment and misery in hell. Basically what Pascal is saying is that eternal rewards or a neutral nothing is better than an eternal hell, an eternal punishment, right? Which sounds fair, it makes sense. Kind of. From this, Pascal said, if you're unsure about whether a god exists or not, worship him anyway, just so you don't end up going to hell. Or rather, just so you don't risk going to hell. On the surface, it seems so logical, it seems like it really does make sense. But it's so flawed, like so completely flawed. So first up, the most obvious problem to me is this assumption that there's like a binary where there isn't one. It's not a matter of if God exists or not, but also if a God exists, which God exists? What does he want? What are his expectations from us? What are his powers? What can he do? Does this mean there's an afterlife or not? And, you know, on this note, where's the proof that the only outcomes are heaven, hell, or nothing? What if there's a purgatory? What if there's a fourth option we haven't thought of yet? My second problem is that the odds are completely off in Pascal's Wager. It really oversimplifies things by assuming that the odds are pretty much 50-50. Even if there was a 50% chance that God existed and a 50% chance he doesn't, that would more likely be, you know, a 50% chance he doesn't exist, and then like a 2% chance that the God of the Bible exists, and a 2% chance that Allah exists, and a 2% chance that Zeus exists, right? And so on and so on. And, you know, I'm picking basically like arbitrary numbers there, just as an example that, you know, there's a hell of a lot of myths and legends and stories about different gods out there. And there's a lot of different god characters to pick from, so how do we know which one's the real one? And how do we know which one to bet on? And that said, how do we know there's only one god? There could be more than one god. In which case, which one do we worship? How do we worship him? Anyway, what I'm saying is it's not a 50-50 thing of like either God exists or he doesn't. And, you know, that's just assuming the whole like 50-50 chance of any god existing, right? That's probably way off. Based on actual evidence that we have and like data that we've collected, perhaps the chances of a god existing or not existing, maybe it's more like, you know, 90% of a chance that a god doesn't exist, and then like a 1% chance that it's the God of the Bible, and a 1% chance that it's Allah, and then like a 0.2% chance that it's Zeus, and whatever. So in that case, you know, it's not like you have a 25% chance of going to heaven, a 25% chance of going to hell, and a 50% chance that nothing happens. That's not the case at all. It's more like you have a 95% chance that nothing happens, a 1% chance of going to heaven and then like a whatever 4% chance of going to hell. I don't know. Like I'm not good at stats. I'm literally picking kind of like general arbitrary numbers here just to kind of illustrate a point. So please don't pick apart my sums because I didn't do any. The point that I'm trying to say is that it's not as simple as Pascal's Wager puts forwards. It's not 50-50 that this or this happens. It's like there's a chance that this could happen, or this, or this, or this, and then following on from that, there's a whole bunch of other possible outcomes and chances and probabilities of things as well, and it's just far, far more complicated than just, well, you're probably better off believing in God. It's far more complicated than that makes out. The third issue that I now have with Pascal's Wager that I didn't actually have before reading The God Delusion, it was one that this book pointed out to me, was that you can force yourself to worship a god but not to believe in one. This book raises the fantastic point that if there is a god and he is omniscient, then he knows about your intentions for everything. So if you're just kind of like forcing yourself to worship him but don't actually believe he exists, then God's gonna know that. Similarly, this omniscient God would know if you actually like care about his judgments or if you're just trying to like, you know, save yourself and whatever. He's basically, the point is an omniscient God is gonna know your intentions, right? So there's not really any hedging your bets because he's gonna know that and he's gonna see that and be like, you might still end up in hell because you wouldn't make that God happy. But again, it all comes down to like, if there is a God, what does he want? What does he expect from us? What does he want? I mean, if the God of the Bible is the real one, then maybe he's okay with people just sucking up to him because his main goal seems to be, you know, that people like him best and people worship him best and, you know, people denounce other gods. That seems to be his goal rather than anything else. Whereas some gods will be like, well, I don't care if you worship me as long as you're a good person and you do good things. So the point is, God might be able to see through someone just hedging their bets, and also different gods might have different expectations, and how do we know which one to follow, and so on. It's complicated. The fourth problem I have with Pascal's Wager is the biggest problem I have with it, is that it focuses far too much on the afterlife, and on how apparently the only focus for our lives, the only thing we should be considering is what happens after we die. I mean, that's fine if there is an afterlife, and that's where we're going to be spending the majority of our lives. But it doesn't consider what happens if this is our only life, if there isn't an afterlife, if this is what we have and we just have to make the most of it. If that's the case, if this is our only life, then surely the focus should be on our actions now and the consequences of our actions now as they happen, not spending all our time thinking about what may or may not come in the future. It's like that saying, isn't it? You know, the one that, okay, this sounds really, really cliched, right? But you know when people say like, oh, if you spend too long thinking about the past or the future, you don't live in the present and you don't think about the present and you don't kind of experience and enjoy the here and now. I know it is a bit of a cliche, but I think it has a pretty excellent point to it. And I think it's relevant here because if you spend your entire life thinking about what's going to happen after you die, you don't really get to enjoy this life, do you? Or you don't fully experience this life. And I think that's a real shame. I think that's pretty sad. You don't enjoy and appreciate the things that are happening now, and you maybe don't think about the actual real life consequences of a lot of your actions. Anyway, with all these kind of like criticisms and problems in mind, I don't think Pascal's Wager is relevant either today or in the past. I think it's very flawed, to be honest. And I have another way to think about things that's a bit more complicated, but I made this stupid little chart on my thoughts, because you know you normally see this chart for Pascal's Wager or something similar. Well, I kind of made my own that it's not exhaustive, it's not complete, there's a lot more you could add to it, but it's just kind of like my way of thinking about things a bit more, in a bit more kind of detail. And basically my conclusion of this whole chart is like, be a good person to others. That's pretty much it. I know that sounds stupid, but I mean there's still plenty more things to consider. For example, in this I don't talk about what would happen if like reincarnation was a thing. I don't really talk about what happens if there's more than one God and so on, and I don't bring like purgatory into it, and yeah. But basically I think the outcome of what I'm trying to say is that it's more important to focus on the life we have now and what we're currently experiencing and what our actions are, you know, I think it's important to think about what our actions are doing now to us and to the people around us, and think about that stuff more than what may or may not happen after we die. Basically what I'm saying is that there may or may not be a God, but until I see definitive proof of one or a number of them, or, you know, any in particular, I'm not gonna start worshipping anyone. I'd much rather focus on creating a good life in this life and enjoying myself and being happy and making other people happy and trying to do some good in the world. Because I don't want to waste this if it is the only life that I have, and I don't want to end up about to die with huge regrets, thinking I missed out and didn't do this and didn't do this, or, you know, oh damn, I wasn't nice enough to that person, or whatever. Yeah, and if there is an afterlife, I want to get there and know that I did the best I could with this one, and not just, you know, use it as a stepping stone, a journey to somewhere else. I think this should be an experience in itself. But anyway, they're just my thoughts. I know this was a little bit different from some of my videos, but I don't know, I thought it was something worth thinking about, and I'd like to know your thoughts. What do you think about kind of like the original Pascal's Wager? What do you think about my kind of version of it, I guess you could say? Yeah, I don't know, it's an interesting one, I think. Do you think there's an afterlife? Do you believe in gods? Do you believe if there was a God, he's really going to care all that much about if we worship him or not? Or do you think he cares more about if we do good things? Or yeah, and like what do you think about the idea of the people who do worship a God but also use that as an excuse to hurt other people or start wars or kind of try and restrict other people's behaviour? I'm rambling now, I'm sorry. Anyway, if you have made it through this far, thank you so much for watching today, I really do appreciate it, and I'll see you again soon. Just wanted to say a quick huge thank you to everyone who is supporting me on Patreon this month, with a special thank you to these guys: Ewan Matthewson, Secular Reason, Daniel Clark, Lachie Scott, Jadeon Sheppard, and Matthew Meinema. You guys are all incredible. Everyone else is linked in the description below or on the end screen. You're all amazing, and just thank you so much.